Hello everyone and welcome back to Make Believe, where we're playing World and Economica. Last time, Yoshiharu had a talk with Barton, or something like that, his name. But he was losing himself. He was feeling like he wasn't really needed with the machine, the program that Hagana made. And he was losing the excitement from the stock trading. He was feeling unmotivated, and the investor noticed that and realized something was wrong from the investments from the contest, I believe. And he knew what was a problem. And maybe he experienced that before himself, or maybe he has just seen other experience it. But he talked about how he shouldn't rely on a mathematician, a program, to do all the work. How if it was as simple as that, everyone would have made it, and eventually, with everyone making it, it wouldn't work out. And there's more to it than just that. So he gave him some examples on everything, and probably put some life back in Yoshiharu. But now Yoshiharu has to decide how he's gonna deal with Hagana and Lisa. Is he gonna just leave them? Is he gonna find a middle ground? We'll have to see. So last time, therefore, it was by chance that I managed to see it. If I had just... Oh, and this was on his way back to the church. Therefore, it was by chance that I managed to see it. If I had just walked the way I was along the street, I would have made it back to the church. I was about to jump from the neighbor's roof onto the church roof. I could sort of see the yard on the third floor. What did he catch? Lisa would have been working at the Chinese restaurant, and no one else would have been around. It had to be Hagana. Furthermore, since the napping set Lisa provided for Hagana was all soft, pure white cushions and blanket, the black-clad Hagana really stood out. I had discovered the sleeping Hagana when I lowered myself into the third floor yard. And look at that, her still sleeping there. She really enjoyed that, the little area they had. She really took my suggestion to rest to heart and was actually resting. Even if it was obvious that she was trying to copy all of my actions, I knew she was dead serious in her own way of trying to adjust the values. Due to air circulation on the moon, sometimes the wind did blow. At that moment came a wind and slowly caressed the scene. The lilies fluttered, the leaves in the big tree fluttered, and Hagana's bangs fluttered. When she was sleeping, she really was an ordinary girl. Furthermore, when I looked closer, she was hugging her terminal tightly while sleeping. Right here. A bit further away from her lay 2 cups. I imagined she would have been with Lisa for the 2 cups, but Lisa's working, right? Perhaps Chris came... Oh, that's right, could have been Chris. Perhaps Chris came over during the day and studied with her. Anyone, even if they were not Hagana, would want to protect this tranquil lifestyle. For example, by trying to help out the frantically hard-working children, like Chris. According to Barton, I think I called him Barton, right? If someone used the same methods as quants, which is what he called Hagana, these methods would get outdated and their performance would drop. In other words, if I were to call it off between us, then Hagana would eventually lose a way to earn money. Burying herself in cushions and grunting like a baby occasionally, she was sound asleep. A single person who came here because she was sold, and she was swallowed up by the unfairness of the world. However, I had to chase my own dreams. For that, Barton was a stepping stone I definitely needed. Therefore, I decided I could only do this. I walked over to Hagana and looked down at her sleeping face. Hagana frowned a bit at the slight reduction of light hitting her and woke up. Once she noticed it was me, she rubbed her eyes and then checked her skirt awkwardly. When we first met, she never cared about getting peeked on from below. Yeah, she grew to see you more as a person. And maybe a little hint of something more. What? She squinted at me and asked. And here was what I said. Let's get first in the investment contest. Huh? Hagana replied, wasn't the most important thing the debt that everyone had? She looked like she was about to respond with that, but I was thinking about something totally different. If she got the contest money, then she'd be able to live her life freely until she could enter college. Look at that, thinking about her, like, the prize money, probably leave it for her, I guess, or at least a portion of it, so that she could hold on until at least she reached college. No matter how hard it is for them to live on their own, 200,000 moles should be plenty. Ah, he might actually be thinking of giving them all the money. If her program could just make some money for a bit longer, then what should be prioritized would be an investment contest that was coming to a close soon. The other people's debt could just be paid back slowly. Hagana's program would be able to hold on to then, right? And once that happened, I could part ways with Hagana and head over to Barton. What's the reason? Cutting off the questioning Hagana, I replied, please. She got herself up from the cushions and was stunned. The lunar wind blew warmly and slowly. Hagana's beautiful hair swayed in the wind. He's always complimenting her hair and her eyes. Is it something important to you? She asked very directly. Even if I had lied and said it was, wouldn't she simply just accept and nod? That was probably the case. The reason she fell upon Lisa's church was probably because she had a mean face, doubted everything, and yet was unable to stand on her own. However, it was something important to me. There was no lie there. That's correct. It might not be for the reason you think, but it is important. Hagana stared at me. Then she looked away, rubbed the hem of her skirt gently, and looked back up. I see. Hagana stood up. Perhaps she was burrowed too deeply in the cushions while sleeping, because as soon as she stood up, she had a very strong and distinctive scent. Oh, imagine being burrowed in cushions like that. Oh, that. Just imagine, it feels amazing. We are really far behind Mr. Trochet, Hagana pointed out. Here was my reply. We'll just have to catch up to him. Easy. Simple, right? And to my words, Hagana appeared to have laughed lightly. That's something rare from Hagana. Since trading in the real market up until now led to tidy profits that no one could complain about, there was only so much that could be earned by winning the investment contest from Hagana's point of view. Currently, including funds entrusted to us, my own capital, and the amount I was going to give to Hagana, the total amount had swelled to 600,000 moles. In other words, a 10% increase would be 60,000 moles in profit, and 20% of that would end up being 12,000 moles for myself. Hagana's share of 20% would come out to 2,400 mole, and even if we did poorly, a 10% profit was doable in a day. The general outlook on my assets put me at a 180,000 moles. I started out with 70,000 moles and made a profit of 110,000 moles. 20% of that was Hagana's share, so at present, Hagana's compensation was above 30,000 moles. In other words, Hagana was only 20,000 moles away from being able to completely pay off Lisa's loan. At the current pace of 3,000, 4,000 moles in profits each day, Quick and Dirty made it so that it wouldn't even take 10 days to accomplish the goal. On top of that, in terms of actual trading, we weren't the only ones who profited. She could greatly help Chris, who had no hope of getting to a university because she had no money despite having a gifted intellect, as well as the residents of the outer section struggling with debt. It was natural to think that Hagana was more focused on that than the investment contest itself. It was completely rational. With the investment contest, no matter how well you did, the prize money was limited to 200,000 moles. After paying off Lisa's 50,000 mole loan, we'd split the difference. Naturally, that was no small amount of money, but real-world trading had no restriction on how many days you could trade. If you spent more time at it, then that time spent would lead to greater profits and an increase in the number of people who could be helped. Nevertheless, Hagana complied with my wishes and focused on the contest. She didn't even ask for reasons. She didn't even know that I had intended to give the 200,000 mole prize money entirely to her. Naturally, I didn't mention that after the contest ended in the near future, I would cut ties with Hagana and work with Barton. Without knowing and without wanting to know, Hagana had offered to help me. Though I wondered if she knew that I was hiding something from her. It was possible that she wasn't the type to think about such things. And why am I saying a bunch of opposites right now? Irrational, impossible. I'm adding parts. A little flashback to this day even. It was the same day. Overdeveloped those skills in mathematics and everything else falls on the wayside, as Martin said it. I have believed those words. I also believed in something entirely different. Okay, so you're not fully committing to believe 100% on Martin. That's good. Create your own belief. The day after Hagana and I decided that we'd focus on investment contests, we had really stayed focused. That day was supposed to be a day off, but we quickly got to trade in the living room and achieved a virtual 2 million moles in profit. Hagana's program was a powerful weapon, making it feel like taking a test while knowing all the answers, and thus it made trading successful. It did scare me that someday a program might make me obsolete. However, in pursuing a goal, this was a more reassuring tool than anything out there for facing that challenge and pushing forward. And here's the difference from the Yoshiharu from yesterday to the Yoshiharu of today. Besides, recently, Hagana had become concerned about my physical well-being and seemed to have a lot of questions to ask. Whether trading was over or not, I was inundated with questions. Is that like flooded with questions? I imagine. I was surprised that she wanted to know so much, but I wondered whether or not I could beat that much zeal. Even as the day waned, without realizing it, Hagana and I would look into our computers and have discussions in the completely dark living room. We came back to our senses only when Lisa returned from the lunar Chinese restaurant and turned on the lights in the living room. Lisa was honestly pleased that I was better again. But what really bothered me the most was when Lisa turned to Hagana and said, "Good for you too," to her. Hagana was as surprised as I was, and she looked between Lisa and me repeatedly. Then I saw that her face was red. She looked down and nodded, Someone got flustered, a bit embarrassed. This was the other half of the reason Hagana offered to listen to my request. More than I imagined, Hagana had forgiven me. By nature, she was very sincere. She knew that Lisa could see that she was overdoing it a bit. It's not far-fetched to say that this was thanks for helping Hagana make use of her mathematical abilities in a real-world setting. But I could see that, to Hagana, this was a simple matter of thanks. Even that day, as if a bath would be a waste of time, she would drag on discussions with me while fiddling with the numerical output of her program, until Lisa finally got mad and forced her to go. Not even 5 minutes would elapse before she'd come right back out. This time she made sure to put on her pajamas, but she didn't take the time to dry her wet hair. Lisa stopped taking any chances and would proceed to wipe Hagana's hair with a bath towel, then finished by wrapping it around her hair. The table in the living room was lined up with work materials, and I could see the nape of Hagana's neck with her hair bundled up like that. The strength of her hair and her white slender neck made her look like a really beautiful and mature woman. I've been noticing lately this whole thing about looking at a woman's neck. Like, there's that whole thing of Japan banning ponytails thing that was going on. Then I saw in some animes, like, Late at night, after Lisa's growing impatience forced me to return to my room, I mailed Barton. Due to various circumstances, please wait until the end of the investment contest for a response, I wrote. Barton's response came immediately, and the content said, "Not a problem." Despite Barton being a wealthy man who went in and out of the Grand Central Hotel and calmly rolled around in a high-class limousine, he didn't seem to exhibit any arrogance or domineering nature. It's nice. He was a man with a big heart who dealt with me as an individual. See, that's nice. I just hope it's not a facet or a facade. Different things. But I hope it's neither of those. I hope it's actually the true him. I had an inkling, more or less, of how exhausting it was working at Schrödinger Street based on rumors on the net and books. Not even being treated as a human being, and having barely any time to sleep. There were only a small number of people with high-paying salaries, and a whole lot of them were often fired after 1 or 2 years. In return, when they hit it big, the returns were massive. However, there were ways to bypass the common route where you gather up capital and, at your own discretion, invest it in the fund and manage it. One could work solo and still amass a fortune. That reason was why it was a normal practice for people to join a major financial institution on Schrödinger Street. It was to build up knowledge and then go solo afterwards. That was why there was probably no more fortuitous situation than training on the Barton swing. If you looked up the Britannica on the net, it was at the 32nd on the list of 5,000 top investments funds in the world by percentage return. The total assets under management were 30 billion moles, while Barton's annual salary was 100 million moles. If I were to train under Barton and then study more beyond that after going solo, I could earn more than Barton, and possibly surpass him as well. The number one fund manager made 2 billion moles a year. In just a few years' time, the amount of money made wouldn't be any different from the budget for a small country. By that time, I would have many connections, and anything would be possible. A dream. A dream about coming upon the undiscovered country. For that dream, I must cut ties with Hagana. On the other hand, Without me around, Hagana's investment program would lose momentum and cease being able to earn her money. I couldn't pick both. But it's very nice that he actually considers her as very important. Maybe the Yoshiharu from the beginning of this game, he would have picked the first one, no questions asked, no second thought. That was why it was necessary to acquire the 200,000 mu prize money in the investment contest. In the hallway? Morning. We ran into let me retry. We ran into each other by chance after waking up in the morning. Hagana was the first to issue a clear greeting. Ah, I replied as we both went to the living room. In the living room, Lisa had prepared breakfast. When she saw Hagana and me come in at the same time, she smiled gently. Today, there are 72 stocks. Volatility is really high, and there were a number of stocks with large price fluctuations. I want you to be careful. I got it. I'm no amateur. I said that while I chewed on some toast, and I knew that Lisa was holding back laughter while she held a coffee cup by the sink. Well, weren't you being cheeky? Was what she really wanted to say, I suppose. But Barton had called out to me, seeing my impressive trading skills. Even now, I was entrusted with many people's money and reaping large profits. Even though that was thanks to Hagana's program, the basis for that program was based on my judgment. Thus, I didn't think it was a bluff. This was a foundation of confidence. And also this music though, it's going off. Like a part of it is familiar, but some part of it, the piano playing was like that. I did not recognize that part. Hagana no longer sat at the other end of the table. She was now always sitting beside me as we ate. Sitting there next to me, Hagana asked me a question. If you aren't an amateur, then what are you? Sarcasm? No, I didn't think so. I replied to the expressionless Hagana. An investor. I like that, considering the talk he had with Barton. An investor. But I don't intend to use the money I stole from my mother. I threw those words directly at Hagana. It seemed that Hagana remembered suddenly, and she looked like she was about to cry as she pulled back. But even then, Hagana kept looking at me and repeated once more quietly. An investor. Yup. Looking at the display, I said, we are investors. Look at that. Next to me, Hagana took a deep breath, which signaled that she understood. As she leaned against the sink, drinking coffee while she watched the exchange between Hagana and me, Lisa smiled without saying a single word and began to wash dishes. We was what I said. There was no question who that other person was. Who will destroy Mr. Trochet? I said that as I glanced at Hagana. Hagana's eyes were unwavering as she nodded, like she was staring down a target in a mafia movie. And trust Yoshiharu, he knows about mafia movies. He's watched a ton. With 500 million moles of funds in virtual market, 3 times with margin trading would be 1.5 billion moles. I was well aware of the fact that it would be impossible, were this to be on the real market, to shift such a massive sum of money quickly. However, in the virtual setting, all participants were given 100 million moles to start with. Thanks to that, contestants could get totally immersed in large volume tradings in a rough and tumble manner. If that became the case, then I would really be at an uncontested advantage. With my perspective on the program now changed, I felt like a fish released in water, able to swim around the market with total freedom. On top of that, the fund's total and rankings were updated every minute of every day, so I was thankful that I didn't have to be worried of high rollers like in a casino. It was completely possible, in reality, for a single person out there with a disgustingly large amount of money to mow down the competition. That was the true form of the demons who lurk in the first 10 minutes of trading. Here and there, I had seen some come together like piranhas ready to tear apart a game. But in my opinion, what was anticipated was so clearly obvious that it would be difficult to derive any profit. Lure things in with a bait, and when they come close, attack. With Hagana's program, I knew how much prices had to move before people using similar programs to trade would flock to the stock. Each transaction would yield 0.3% or 0.5%, which wasn't much in terms of profit. Time spent looking over Hagana's terminal was precious, and before long, Hagana started to read the stocks out loud. On top of that, Hagana in her own way had a strong personality, and did not know anything about taking it easy. As I listened to her raging words, I started trading like crazy, so that even the time to breathe seemed precious. Naturally, it destroyed me. The fatigue was no different from torture. In the instant that the morning trading was completed, I looked straight up as if my computer gave me an electric shock. Taking a deep breath, I fell back against the chair without another thought. I couldn't move an inch. See, I'm doing the opposite again. I couldn't utter a single word. Even with my eyes closed, the numbers swirled in my head. The necessity to do one thing or another caused a feeling of unease to swirl around in my mind. But it wasn't because I was not feeling well. Facing my objective, no matter what tools I used, it was clear what I had to do. After all, what I was doing was no different from when I was suffering before. In fact, the intensity was much higher. But I wasn't feeling bad about it. Furthermore, 3 days after we started concentrating on the investment contest, Hagana brought me a damn towel warmed in the microwave since I was slumped on my back staring at the ceiling. I imagine Lisa had suggested that she do that, but I was really happy she did. Even though trading was over, she didn't get up from her chair. She continued to sit next to me, tapping away at her terminal. Hagana herself also needed rest, so she closed her eyes at times. It was very quiet, and even though we only looked at each other when we talked, somehow it felt very friendly. I knew that we were both running towards the same destination. Once the break was over, we'd eat, proceed with the afternoon trading, and then limp on until dinner, exhausted to the point of not being able to stand. Oops. Wouldn't be me if I didn't accidentally press that, right? At dinner, we could return to being human again, with Lisa providing some light banter while Hagana stayed by my side, making improvements to her program. Our virtual funds were increasing in 10 million intervals. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Trochet, who had an MBA from Harvard University, completely controlled the market. A week before we had to stop trading, he had amassed 360 million moves through his trades. While the increase in assets was rather shocking, I said to myself that it wasn't an impossible plateau to reach. But to close all positions with such precision was impressive of him, I thought. With the market this frantic, there was a chance that prices would go up, but also a chance you lose the shirt off your back. Specifically, if you had Mr. Trochet's level of assets, there was a possibility you could get targeted. With what trades you were making analyzed, there were already a number of people who had been targeted and had fallen tremendously in rankings. The secret to how that worked was that even for people who had finished their trading but had unclosed positions, The amount of money displayed next to the rankings would change as the stocks moved every day. Where some choose a program like Hagana's, one could ferret out those stocks by looking at all available stocks and competing possible candidates by comparing the price fluctuations of stocks with the movement of the fortunes of the top-ranked participants. After that, all that would be necessary would be to join forces with others to do some reverse trading. We were sitting in 4th place at 150 million moles, with the distance to 2nd place being 100 million moles, and 3rd place being about half that amount. So 150, 200, 250, 360. Yeah, a big jump for 1st place, while 4th through 2nd is almost pretty consistent. Technically, there was 1 week left, but there was a Sunday in between, which made for 6 actual days of trading possible. With Sunday in the middle, after trading on Monday and Tuesday, it would all end on 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Hagana and I mustered all our available strength. The moment a loss was taken due to carelessness, not heeding a warning from the program, Hagana would lash out with that foot of hers, and when she misread something about certain stocks, I'd yell at her afterwards. Even then, things didn't turn gloomy. I knew that Lisa would become excited many times during all of this, but it never made things worse. 30 million moles of profit on Thursday and 20 million moles on Friday put us just at 200 million moles, passing the guy at 3rd place by a narrow margin with only 40 million moles between us and 2nd place. There was still the 160 million mole difference between us and Mr. Trochet. For Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, and Wednesday, we had to increase our total gain by 80% at all costs. We were trading completely with full leverage, so it was no different from having 600 million moles at our disposal. So all we had to do was to achieve a real return of 27%. Returns of 10%, 10%, and 10% would be more than sufficient. But based on the performance on Thursday and Friday, whether this was possible or not was unclear. Honestly, we were trading at an unprecedented level. We were pushing ourselves with all our might, and Hagana was whittling down her sleeping hours. She'd camp out waiting for Lisa to go to bed, then sneak into my room, working on improving the program until morning. That's cute. There were times where she would be sleeping like a log beside me. Also, she was sleep deprived a lot more, and would drop her chopsticks or spoon more often during meals. We both knew that we were nearing our limits. However, Lisa wouldn't object. There was no room for her to do so. Almost there. On Saturday, at the end of our discussion, we thought about taking on more risk. Fiddling with the numbers on the program in order to select a number of stocks with large price fluctuations, we selected more speculative stocks. For the ones with large price fluctuations, many were selected through derivations based off the mathematical principles Hagana utilized. It was an unattainable region, much like the concept Barton had spoken of. A region of extreme rises and falls where human sentiment could clearly be seen. In the midst of all this tension, Hagana and I began Saturday trading. We felt strong progress as I was suddenly able to knock down the feeling of tension from feeling the time crunch. Hagana went so far as to borrow Lisa's terminal and ask Cyril to copy the program. During trading, the program content was updated in real time. Doing all this while being sleep deprived and exhausted, we weren't looking so healthy. But even though you guys weren't looking so healthy, look at that smile. You guys are enjoying to the fullest. But even so, at the end of the Saturday, when she saw that we had managed to hit 60 million moles of profit, even Hagana was all smiles. You guys are in second place. For the moment, we were in second place. Exactly. Only 2 more times. If we could do that again 2 more times, we could defeat Mr. Trochet. Now that I think about it, 60 million in one day, that's impressive. That excitement blew away all the fatigue and sleep deprivation. We had set foot upon new territory. No, more accurately, it was Hagana's program that led me right to the footstep of a deeper place within me. But even then, I wasn't against the idea. If there was something I could give to Hagana, I was determined to give her everything. An email from Barton arrived on my computer. Interesting, it said. Barton, who paid the sponsorship fee and could look at the trading history of all participants in the trading contest, could believe that we had gone a step further based on our trading history. Saturday night, that excitement was a helping hand as Hagen and I researched stocks and updated her program in my room till 3 in the morning. But no matter how much willpower was replenished, the body had its limits. Pathetically, I was the first to give in, and I slept that day. Hagana said that she had more things to think about and got up, but given how often it had already happened this far, I paid her no heed and continued to sleep. Light fell upon the desk as Hagana tapped her terminal. But the call to sleep was enough that I paid absolutely no heed to this as I slipped back into unconsciousness. In the dark. That was why when I woke suddenly, I thought it was strange. I figured I had neglected to go and use the bathroom. But I realized that wasn't the case as I heard the sound of someone sleeping nearby. And it wasn't me. You're both sleeping in the same bed? Oh. Hello. First thing I noticed, this little hand holding here. I'm guessing that's holding Yoshiharu. Like, it's so... I love character development, and it's so nice to see the comparison of Yoshiharu and Hagana at the beginning, and them now. Huh. I wasn't sure whether I was half asleep or not. What I did know was that Hagana had gone into my bed and was sleeping next to me. Or rather, I wasn't sure whether next to me was the right way of describing this situation. Hagana's hands were tucked close to her body as she slept like a baby in the fetal position. Her face was above my right shoulder. Her forehead was against my cheek. Her hand clutched my pajamas. Yup. Oops. There we go. Her hand clutching his pajamas. The side of her foot was on top of mine. Hagana's body temperature was rather high, enough for me to wonder if she might have had a fever. But more so than it just being abnormal, her high body temperature was similar to that of an infant. That was why, I suppose. Though I was surprised when I realized that she was sleeping next to me, I didn't think of anything beyond that. Besides, I wasn't exactly filled with guilt about it. I was more filled with the notion of hopefully not waking up Hagana, as well as a sense of happiness. Look at that. That pure happy thought. Like, it makes me happy just seeing them like this. This was the first that I know how comfortable it was to be attached to someone like this. And you're planning to leave that behind to follow your dream. Before long, I succumbed to sleep, and the morning soon came. It's not like I had set an alarm, so it felt like I could just sleep forever. But I woke up at the usual 7 a.m. Though I only slept about 3-4 hours, today I woke up on the dot, as usual. I'm surprised you have an internal clock, and you're only sleeping 3 to 4 hours a day. Man, that's certainly unhealthy. Immediately, I thought about Hagana. Hello again. She really was still clinging on to me as she slept. Oh. Hello. Somebody's awake. Actually, we both woke up at the same time. Though Awakened Hagana looked blankly at nothing in particular. She was basically sleeping out of her half-asleep state, and I could see that she didn't know where she was. Perhaps, due to fatigue and sleepiness, she had simply forgotten where her bedroom was. That's what I thought when Hagana closed her eyes and curled her body more. She then yawned loudly and looked at me, who was rather close to her. And with the usual intense look in her eyes, she spoke. Your snoring is loud. Anger and a strange kind of happiness were hanging dangerously over the room. Really, anger? The only reason accident didn't occur was that Hagana quickly, or rather, a bit too quickly, slipped out of bed. Look at that. That's stretching in the morning. In the morning light, Hagana's beautiful hair fell smoothly along her back without a strand of bad hair. She murmured in a delightful low voice as she stretched, and I could see the line of her body clearly as her pajamas rustled. Hagana's body heat lingered in the futon, as did her fragrance, which was clearly not from shampoo or body soap. Courtesy of the phenomenon called morning glory, I couldn't exactly get out of bed at this point. Boys will be boys. I don't think the name is Morning Glory, but we'll leave it at that. Hagana tapped the terminal on the desk to start it up, and she turned towards me with it in hand. How long do you intend to sleep? She said that with a disdainful look in her eyes. Even with her contempt, I couldn't really make excuses, and thus I replied, Give me 5 more minutes. Hagana thought about it for a moment and nodded. I'll come and wake you up in 5 minutes. She walked briskly out of the room. 5 minutes was more than enough to get prepared. I think... I think we're gonna stop here. Yeah, I was thinking about it, but I think this is a good stopping point. I don't know when will be the next good stopping point. That's the problem. So yeah, I was talking about if he would abandon Hagana, if he would leave his dream, postpone his dream, if he would find a middle ground. And the middle ground he chose was that he would do this with Hagana, he would accumulate the money from the prize money and give it to her and Lisa so she could live on until she made it to college. There was also a program that could help her a little so that she could live her life. And she had a basis to live her life. Meanwhile, he would follow his dream. So I guess that's in a way a middle ground. But it's not just about the money. Like, as we could clearly see, she had grown close to him. They have become a duo. I dread to see the day when this duo disbands. But for now, that's it. So with that being said, see you next time. Bye.